Hey there, you looking kinda cute. Don't forget to subscribe and check out my other socials for more. Enjoy. Long, slender fingers pushed back a mop of tousled brown hair, revealing a face with delicate features, high cheekbones, full lips, and large hazel eyes framed by long lashes. But as Duke gazed at his reflection in the mirror across the room, all he saw were the masculine angles of his jaw and the stubble beginning to darken his chin. He sighed heavily, shoulders slumping as he swung his legs over the side of the bed. Another day of feeling trapped in the wrong body, another day of pretending to be someone he wasn't. A sharp knock at the door jolted Duke from his brooding. "You decent in there, sleepin' beauty?" called a familiar voice. Despite his melancholy mood, Duke couldn't help but smile. "As decent as I'll ever be," he called back. "Come on in, Leo." The door swung open and Leonard sauntered in, looking far too chipper for the early hour. His wild red curls were barely contained by a backwards baseball cap, and his green eyes sparkled with mischief. "Rise and shine, princess," he teased, flopping onto the bed beside Duke. "We've got a big day ahead of us." Duke groaned and buried his face in his hands. "Don't remind me. I still can't believe I let you talk me into this." Leonard's expression softened as he placed a comforting hand on his friend's shoulder. "Hey now, none of that. This consultation could change everything for you. Dr. Reeves is the best in the business when it comes to gender confirmation surgery." I know, Duke muttered. "It's just, what if she takes one look at me and laughs me right out of her office? What if I'm not, woman enough?" "That's ridiculous, and you know it," Leonard said firmly. "You're more of a woman than half the CIS ladies I know. Now come on, get that cute butt of yours in gear. We've got an appointment to keep." With a theatrical sigh, Duke hauled himself to his feet and shuffled towards the bathroom. Fine, but you're buying me coffee on the way. The good stuff, not that gas station swill you usually try to pass off as caffeine." Leonard's laughter followed him as he closed the bathroom door. "Your wish is my command, Your Highness." As the shower sputtered to life, Duke allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He'd been dreaming of this day for as long as he could remember, the day he'd finally take the first real steps towards becoming the woman he knew he was meant to be. But now that it was here, he found himself paralyzed by fear and doubt. What if it all went wrong? What if he ended up looking like some grotesque caricature of femininity? What if? Duke shook his head forcefully, sending water droplets flying. No, he couldn't let himself spiral into negativity. This was his chance, perhaps his only chance, to finally feel at home in his own skin. He had to seize it with both hands. 30 minutes later, freshly showered and dressed in his most feminine outfit, a flowing floral skirt and soft lavender sweater, Duke emerged from the bathroom. Leonard wolf whistled appreciatively, earning him a playful swat. "Looking good, girl," Leonard said with a wink. "Ready to knock 'em dead?" Duke took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be," he replied, summoning a brave smile. "Let's do this." The drive to Dr. Reeves's office passed in a blur of nervous chatter and half-hearted jokes. Before Duke knew it, they were pulling into the parking lot of a sleek, modern medical building. "Well, this is it," Leonard said, killing the engine. He turned to face Duke, his expression serious. "No matter what happens in there, I want you to know how proud I am of you. You're the bravest person I know, Duke." Tears pricked at Duke's eyes, and he blinked them back furiously. "Thanks, Leo," he whispered. "I couldn't do this without you." They shared a quick, fierce hug before climbing out of the car. As they approached the building's entrance, Duke's steps faltered. Leonard was there in an instant, his arm around Duke's waist, steadying him. "I've got you," he murmured. "We're in this together, remember?" Duke nodded, drawing strength from his friend's unwavering support. Together, they pushed through the doors and into the bright, airy lobby. The receptionist looked up as they approached, her smile warm and welcoming. "Good morning," she greeted them. "How can I help you today?" Duke's throat went dry, the carefully rehearsed words evaporating from his mind. Leonard squeezed his hand encouragingly, and he found his voice at last. I have an appointment with Dr. Reeves, he managed. The name is Duke Hawthorne. The receptionist's smile never faltered as she tapped away at her computer. Of course, Mr. Hawthorne. Dr. Reeves is expecting you. If you'll just have a seat, she'll be with you shortly. Duke mumbled his thanks and allowed Leonard to guide him to a plush leather chair. His leg bounced nervously as they waited, his fingers twisting in the soft fabric of his skirt. Hey, Leonard said softly, covering Duke's restless hands with his own. It's going to be okay. Dr. Reeves has helped hundreds of people just like you. She's not here to judge, only to help. Duke nodded, trying to draw comfort from his friend's words. But as the minutes ticked by, his anxiety only grew. By the time a nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand, Duke was certain he was going to be sick. Duke Hawthorne? The nurse called. Duke stood on shaky legs, Leonard rising with him. That's me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The nurse smiled kindly. Dr. Reeves is ready for you now. Would you like your friend to accompany you? Duke looked to Leonard, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, please, Duke said, if that's all right. Of course, the nurse replied. Right this way, please. They followed her down a short hallway, the click of Duke's low heels echoing loudly in the quiet space. At last, they reached a door with a tasteful plaque reading Dr. Amelia Reeves, Gender Confirmation Specialist. The nurse knocked once before opening the door. Dr. Reeves, your 10 o'clock is here. Wonderful! Send them in! Called a warm, rich voice from within. Taking a deep breath, Duke stepped into the office, Leonard close behind. Dr. Reeves rose from behind her desk, her smile genuine and welcoming. She was a striking woman in her late 40s, with salt and pepper hair cropped short and intelligent brown eyes that crinkled at the corners. Duke Hawthorne, I presume? She said, extending her hand. I'm Dr. Reeves. It's a pleasure to meet you. Duke shook her hand, marveling at the strength in her grip. Likewise, he managed. This is my friend Leonard. I hope it's okay that he's here. Of course, Dr. Reeves said, shaking Leonard's hand as well. Support systems are crucial in this journey. Please have a seat. As they settled into the comfortable chairs across from her desk, Dr. Reeves leaned forward, her expression open and attentive. So, Duke, she began, why don't you tell me a bit about yourself and what brings you to my office today? Duke swallowed hard, his fingers twisting in his lap. He'd rehearsed this moment 100 times in his head, but now that it was here, he found himself at a loss for words. Leonard reached over, giving his hand a reassuring squeeze. Drawing strength from his friend's unwavering support, Duke took a deep breath and began to speak. For as long as I can remember, he said softly, I've known that I was different, that the body I was born into, it isn't me, isn't who I truly am inside. Dr. Reeves nodded encouragingly, her pen poised over a notepad. And who are you inside, Duke? She asked gently. Duke's eyes welled with tears, but for once he didn't try to hold them back. I'm a woman, he whispered. I've always been a woman. I need help making the outside match the inside. As the words left his lips, Duke felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He'd said it. After years of hiding, of pretending, he'd finally spoken his truth aloud. Dr. Reeves smiled warmly. Thank you for sharing that with me, Duke. I know how difficult and scary it can be to take this first step, but I want you to know that you're not alone in this journey. There are many people just like you who have walked this path before, and many more who will come after. She leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. Now, I'd like to discuss your options. Gender confirmation is a complex process, and there are many different approaches we can take. It's important that we find the path that's right for you. For the next hour, Dr. Reeves patiently explained the various medical and surgical options available. She answered Duke's questions with candor and compassion, never once making him feel judged or foolish for his concerns. As the consultation drew to a close, Dr. Reeves sat back with a smile. "Well, Duke, I think we've covered quite a bit of ground today. How are you feeling?" Duke took a moment to consider the question. "Overwhelmed," he admitted, "but hopeful. For the first time in a long time, I feel like there might actually be a light at the end of this tunnel." Dr. Reeves nodded approvingly. "That's wonderful to hear. Now, I'd like to schedule you for some preliminary tests and assessments. Once we have those results, we can start putting together a more concrete treatment plan. How does that sound?" "It sounds perfect," Duke said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "Thank you, Dr. Reeves, for everything." As they left the office, Duke felt as though he were walking on air. Leonard slung an arm around his shoulders, grinning from ear to ear. "See," he said. "I told you it would be okay. Dr. Reeves is amazing, isn't she?" Duke nodded, still somewhat dazed by the whirlwind of information and emotion. "She really is. I can't believe this is actually happening, Leo. It feels like a dream." Leonard's expression softened, and he pulled Duke into a tight hug. "It's not a dream, sweetheart. This is real. You're finally on your way to becoming the woman you've always been inside." As they embraced in the middle of the parking lot, Duke allowed himself to truly believe, for the first time, that his dream might actually come true. The weeks that followed were a blur of medical appointments, therapy sessions, and endless paperwork. Duke threw himself into researching every aspect of his transition, determined to be as prepared as possible for the journey ahead. Leonard was there every step of the way, offering unwavering support and a shoulder to cry on during the inevitable moments of doubt and fear. He accompanied Duke to appointments, helped him navigate the complicated legal process of changing his name and gender marker, and spent countless hours listening as Duke poured out his hopes and fears for the future. As the date of Duke's first hormone therapy appointment drew near, he found himself growing increasingly anxious. What if it didn't work? What if he changed his mind? What if... The night before the appointment, Duke lay awake in bed, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Unable to bear the solitude any longer, he reached for his phone and dialed Leonard's number. "Duke?" Leonard's voice was thick with sleep. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm scared, Leo," Duke whispered, his voice trembling. "What if I'm making a huge mistake?" There was a rustling sound, and Duke could picture Leonard sitting up in bed, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "Oh, sweetheart," he said softly. "It's normal to be scared. This is a big step. But you've wanted this for so long. You've thought it through. You've talked to the doctors. You've done everything right. This isn't a mistake, Duke. This is you finally becoming who you've always been meant to be." Tears slid down Duke's cheeks as he listened to his friend's reassuring words. What if people don't accept me?" he asked, voicing his deepest fear. "What if I lose everyone I care about?" "You won't lose me," Leonard said firmly. "No matter what happens, no matter how you look or what name you choose or anything else, you will always have me in your corner. And anyone who can't see how amazing and beautiful you are, inside and out, they don't deserve to be in your life anyway." Duke closed his eyes, letting Leonard's words wash over him. "Thank you," he whispered. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Leo." "Lucky for you, you'll never have to find out," Leonard replied, a smile evident in his voice. "Now try to get some sleep, okay? Tomorrow's a big day and you need your beauty rest." As Duke drifted off to sleep, he felt a sense of calm settle over him. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew he wouldn't have to face them alone. The next morning dawned bright and clear, as if the universe itself were celebrating Duke's new beginning. Leonard arrived early, armed with coffee and pastries from Duke's favorite bakery. "Gotta make sure you're properly fueled for your big day," he said with a wink, setting the goodies on the kitchen counter. Duke emerged from the bedroom, fidgeting nervously with the hem of his shirt. He'd agonized over what to wear, finally settling on a pair of skinny jeans and a flowing blouse in a soft shade of blue. Leonard let out a low whistle of appreciation.
Well, 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 he said, grinning. Look at you, hot stuff. If I didn't know any better, I'd say you were trying to impress someone.
Duke blushed, swatting at his friend playfully. Oh, stop it. I wanted to look nice. For myself. Leonard's expression softened.
And you do,
he said sincerely. You look beautiful, Duke, inside and out. They shared a quiet moment, the air between them thick with unspoken emotion. Then Leonard clapped his hands briskly, breaking the spell.
All right, enough mushy stuff,
he declared.
Let's get some food in you before we head out. Can't have you fainting on the doctor, now can we?
As they ate, Leonard kept up a steady stream of cheerful chatter, effectively distracting Duke from his nerves. Before he knew it, it was time to leave for the appointment. The drive to the clinic seemed to take both an eternity and no time at all. As Leonard pulled into a parking space, Duke felt his heart begin to race.
Hey,
Leonard said softly, reaching over to squeeze Duke's hand.
You've got this. I'm so proud of you.
You know that. Duke nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Together, they made their way into the clinic. The waiting room was mercifully quiet, with only a handful of other patients scattered about. Duke sank into a chair, his leg bouncing nervously as he waited for his name to be called. After what felt like hours, but was likely only a few minutes, a nurse appeared in the doorway.
Duke Hawthorne?
Duke stood on shaky legs, Leonard rising with him. The nurse smiled kindly. Right this way, please. Dr. Matthews is ready for you. As they followed the nurse down the hallway, Duke felt as though he were walking through a dream. This was it, the moment that would change everything. Dr. Matthews turned out to be a cheerful woman in her early 30s with a shock of curly black hair and a ready smile. She greeted Duke warmly, shaking his hand before gesturing for him to take a seat. So, Duke, she began, her tone friendly but professional. Today's the big day. How are you feeling? Duke took a deep breath, considering the question. Nervous, he admitted. Excited. Terrified. All of the above, I guess. Dr. Matthews nodded understandingly. That's completely normal, she assured him. Starting hormone therapy is a big step, but I want you to know that we're going to take things slow and steady. We'll be monitoring you closely, and if at any point you feel uncomfortable or have concerns, I want you to speak up. Okay. Duke nodded, feeling some of the tension leave his shoulders. Okay, he said. I can do that. Excellent, Dr. Matthews said with a smile. Now, let's go over the treatment plan one more time, just to make sure we're all on the same page. For the next half hour, Dr. Matthews patiently explained the hormone therapy process, answering Duke's questions and addressing his concerns. By the time she finished, Duke felt significantly calmer and more prepared for what lay ahead. All right, Dr. Matthews said at last, reaching for a small box on her desk. Are you ready to take your first dose? Duke's heart leapt into his throat. This was it, the moment of truth. He looked to Leonard, who gave him an encouraging nod. I'm ready, Duke said, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Matthews smiled warmly as she handed him the box containing his first hormone prescription. Congratulations, Duke, she said. This is the first day of the rest of your life. As they left the clinic, Duke clutched the small box to his chest like a precious treasure. Leonard slung an arm around his shoulders, grinning from ear to ear. I am so incredibly proud of you, he said, pulling Duke close. You did it, sweetheart. You took the first step. Duke leaned into his friend's embrace, overwhelmed by the emotions coursing through him. I couldn't have done it without you, Leo, he murmured. Thank you for everything. Leonard pressed a kiss to the top of Duke's head. Anytime, princess. Now what do you say we go celebrate? I think this calls for ice cream. My treat. Duke laughed, feeling lighter than he had in years. Ice cream sounds perfect, he agreed. As they walked to the car, hand in hand, Duke felt a sense of hope and possibility he'd never experienced before. The road ahead would be long and challenging, he knew. But for the first time in his life, he truly believed that happiness, true, authentic happiness, was within his reach. The months that followed were a whirlwind of changes, both physical and emotional. Duke watched in awe as his body slowly began to transform, softening and curving in ways he'd only dreamed of before. There were difficult moments, of course, days when the hormones made him feel out of sorts, when the slow pace of change felt unbearable, when the fear of rejection and judgment threatened to overwhelm him. But through it all, Leonard remained a constant source of support and encouragement. As Duke's appearance began to align more closely with his true gender, he found himself facing a new challenge, coming out to the people in his life. He started small, confiding in a few close friends who had always suspected there was more to Duke than met the eye. To his immense relief and gratitude, most of his friends were supportive. There were a few awkward moments and well-intentioned but clumsy questions, but overall, Duke felt blessed by the acceptance he received. His family, however, was a different story. Duke had always been close to his parents and younger sister, but he feared their reaction to his transition. For weeks, he agonized over how to tell them, drafting and redrafting letters, rehearsing speeches in the mirror. In the end, it was Leonard who gave him the courage to face his family. "They love you, Duke," he said gently. "Maybe they won't understand right away, but if they truly love you, they'll come around. And if they don't, well, then they don't deserve you." So, with Leonard by his side for moral support, Duke invited his family over for dinner. As they sat around the table, picking at a meal Duke had spent hours preparing, he finally gathered the courage to speak his truth. "Mom, Dad, Emily," he began, his voice shaking. "There's something I need to tell you. Something I've been keeping inside for a very long time." His mother's brow furrowed with concern. "What is it, sweetheart? You know you can tell us anything." Duke took a deep breath, feeling Leonard's reassuring presence beside him. I'm transgender," he said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I've always felt like I was born in the wrong body. I'm a woman, and I've started the process of transitioning." For a long moment, there was only silence. Duke's heart pounded in his chest as he watched the shock and confusion play across his family's faces. His father was the first to speak. I don't understand," he said, his voice gruff with emotion. "You've always been such a manly man. How can you suddenly decide you're a woman?" Duke flinched at the words, but Leonard squeezed his hand under the table, lending him strength. "It's not sudden, Dad," he explained gently. "I've felt this way my entire life. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid of disappointing you." His mother reached across the table, taking Duke's free hand in hers. "Oh, sweetheart," she said, tears glistening in her eyes. "You could never disappoint us. We love you no matter what. It's a lot to take in, but we're here for you. Always." Emily, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly stood up and came around the table. Without a word, she enveloped Duke in a fierce hug. "I always knew there was something special about you," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you for being brave enough to be yourself." As Duke returned his sister's embrace, he felt the tears he'd been holding back begin to fall. He looked over Emily's shoulder to see his father, still looking shell-shocked but no longer angry. "Son, or I suppose I should say daughter," his father said haltingly. "I won't pretend I understand all of this, but I love you, and I want you to be happy. If this is what you need to do to be happy, then I support you." The floodgates opened then, and soon the whole family was crying and hugging, years of unspoken fears and secrets washing away in a tide of love and acceptance. As the emotional storm began to subside, Duke's mother wiped her eyes and managed a watery smile. "So," she said, her voice still thick with emotion, "have you chosen a new name?" Duke nodded, a sense of peace settling over him. "I have," he said softly. "Zora. My name is Zora." His mother's smile widened. "Zora," she repeated. "It's beautiful, just like you." As the evening wore on, Duke, Now Zora felt as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. There would be challenges ahead, she knew, misunderstandings to navigate, prejudices to overcome, but for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen and accepted for who she was. Later that night, as Leonard drove her home, Zora couldn't stop smiling. "I can't believe it went so well," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I was so scared, but they still love me?" Leonard reached over, taking her hand in his. "Of course they do," he said softly. "How could anyone not love you, Zora? You're amazing." There was something in his voice, a warmth and tenderness that made Zora's heart skip a beat. She looked over at her best friend, seeing him in a new light. "Leo," she said hesitantly, there's something else I need to tell you." Leonard glanced at her, concern etching his features. "What is it? Is everything okay?" Zora took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "I'm in love with you," she blurted out. "I have been for a long time, I think. I didn't know how to tell you. I was afraid it would ruin our friendship." The car swerved slightly as Leonard processed her words. He pulled over to the side of the road, putting the vehicle in park before turning to face Zora fully. You love me?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Zora nodded, her heart pounding. "I do," she said softly. "I understand if you don't feel the same way. I needed you to know." For a long moment, Leonard just stared at her, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, a smile began to spread across his face. "Zora," he said, reaching out to cup her cheek. "I've been in love with you for years. I didn't think you could ever see me that way." Zora's eyes widened in disbelief. "Really?" she breathed. Instead of answering, Leonard leaned in and kissed her softly. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were grinning like fools. "Well," Leonard said, his eyes twinkling, "I guess this is the start of a whole new adventure for us, huh?" Zora laughed, feeling happier than she ever had in her life. "I guess it is," she agreed, "and I can't wait to see where it takes us." As they drove off into the night, hand in hand, Zora felt a sense of peace and rightness settle over her. The road ahead would have its challenges, she knew, but with Leonard by her side and the love of her family to support her, she was ready to face whatever came her way. For the first time in her life, Zora was truly, completely herself, and it felt wonderful. The years that followed were a whirlwind of change and growth for Zora. With each passing day, she became more comfortable in her own skin, more confident in her identity as a woman. Her relationship with Leonard blossomed, deepening into a love that sustained and supported them both through the ups and downs of life. Zora continued her medical transition, undergoing various surgeries and treatments to align her body with her true gender. It wasn't always easy. There were days of pain and discomfort, moments of doubt and fear. But through it all, Leonard was there, holding her hand, wiping away her tears, and reminding her of how strong and beautiful she was. As Zora's outward appearance began to match her inner self, she found a newfound confidence in all aspects of her life. She excelled in her career as a graphic designer, earning promotions and accolades for her creativity and dedication. She cultivated deep, meaningful friendships with people who accepted and celebrated her for who she truly was. Her relationship with her family continued to grow and strengthen. While there were occasional missteps and misunderstandings, Zora's parents and sister made a concerted effort to educate themselves about transgender issues and to support her in every way they could. Family gatherings, once a source of anxiety and discomfort for Zora, became joyous occasions filled with love and laughter. 3 years after Zora's transition began, Leonard proposed. It was a quiet, intimate moment, just the two of them on a moonlit beach, the sound of waves lapping at the shore. As Leonard knelt in the sand, holding out a ring that glittered in the starlight, Zora felt her heart swell with love and gratitude. "Zora," Leonard said, his voice thick with emotion.
You are the bravest, most beautiful soul I've ever known. You've taught me what it means to be true to yourself, to fight for your happiness no matter the odds. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, supporting you, loving you, growing with you. Will you marry me?" Tears streaming down her face, Zora nodded emphatically. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes. Their wedding, held the following spring, was a celebration of love in all its forms. Zora, resplendent in a flowing white gown, walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her face radiant with joy. Leonard waited for her at the altar, his eyes shining with unshed tears as he watched his bride approach. As they exchanged vows, pledging their love and commitment before their friends and family, Zora felt a sense of completeness she'd never experienced before. This was what she'd been searching for her entire life, not just the physical transformation, but the emotional and spiritual journey that had brought her to this moment. In the years that followed, Zora and Leonard built a life together filled with love, laughter, and mutual support. They traveled the world, adopted a pair of rescue dogs, and eventually welcomed a beautiful baby girl into their family through adoption. Zora never forgot the struggles and pain of her early years, the feeling of being trapped in a body that didn't match her soul. But those memories only served to make her more compassionate, more determined to help others who were on similar journeys. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to check out my other socials if you want more wonderful content, early access, behind the scenes, and more. All links down below.